In Genesis 22 is the story of where God commands Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac. Now, many critics of Christianity will use this story and say, oh, well, God is abusive and he's a dictator and he's a tyrant and religion is poisonous and bad. And how could you follow this kind of God that is telling Abraham to abuse his son and kill him? This is one of those stories in the Bible where, yeah, on the surface, it is kind of weird and it's hard to understand. But if you have an open heart and open mind and you're actually searching for the truth of the matter and not just to ridicule Christianity with it, then you can actually really understand what's going on, big picture. And you'll also be able to see that, God is not being some abusive, tyrannical God. Now here, we're just going to take a very Sparks Note version of this story. I really recommend this book called Is God a Moral Monster by Paul Copan. And he's got a excellent book. And he's got a whole chapter dealing with this story of Abraham sacrificing his son Isaac. So I really recommend this book. He does a phenomenal job breaking down this whole thing. We're seriously going to look at just such a small portion of this story. But if you're interested in it, I really recommend the book. Link is in the description for the book. So let's get some context to the story of Abraham being tested by God. All right, so in Genesis 12, it's the Lord says to Abraham, I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you, and I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. God is promising Abraham here that his kids, that his descendants are going to be the lineage for a great nation, which sounds like a great promise until you realize that Abraham is 75 years old and his wife is 65. I'm no genius, but that's a little old to be having kids. It's not really happening. And they didn't have any kids at this point. Okay, and this promise is made in Genesis 12. All right, and then the test of Abraham comes in Genesis 22. So for 10 chapters of this story that we're going to skip, Abraham is wrestling with this promise because he understands I'm way too old to be able to have kids. But God promises that I'm going to have kids and they're going to become a great nation. Abraham really wrestles with this promise. Okay, but skipping over 10 chapters, Abraham is 100 years old when he has his first son with his wife, who is 90 years old. And this son is Isaac, and Isaac is the son that God promised Abraham. So God's promise that Abraham's descendants will become a great nation is all in Isaac. Isaac is that promise. So then comes the test where God tells Abraham that he needs to sacrifice Isaac. Okay? And I believe there's great evidence that Abraham had faith in God this entire time, and that he trusted that God had a plan, and that God was going to keep his promise. In Genesis 22, verse 5, it says, Abraham said to his servants, stay here with the donkey while I and the boy go over there. We will worship, and then we will come back to you. Abraham knew at this point that he was supposed to sacrifice his son Isaac. So then why is Abraham saying that we, as in Isaac and I, are going to come down this mountain? How did Abraham know that Isaac was going to live, that he wasn't actually going to have to sacrifice Isaac? I think Abraham had great trust that God was not going to forget his promise. And that's exactly what happens. God holds on to his promise of Isaac. And in Genesis 22, it says, I swear by myself, declares the Lord, that because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as the sand on the seashore. Your descendants will take possession of the cities of their enemies, and through your offspring, all nations on earth will be blessed, because you have obeyed me. God kept his promise. The key point to this story is that Abraham trusted in God. He had faith in God's plan. And Abraham is ultimately the example of how Christians should live their lives today. Paul Copan writes in his book, "We're to approach God trustingly, depending on his grace and sufficiency, rather than putting confidence in our own sufficiency." So does Abraham's trust in God inspire you to deepen your trust in God? And do you think that your faith could be a blessing for others, just like Abraham's faith was a blessing for all of Israel? I don't know about you, but that encourages me to to deepen my faith and to realize that trusting in God is very valuable, and it's a great thing. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it helps you. I hope it encourages you. If you have any questions, you can send me an email. My email's in the description below. Thank you for watching again, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.